Hello everyone! Today I am going to review the 2005 film adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. This version of the Jane Austen novel was directed by Joe Wright and stars Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadden. It was inevitable that someday I would review this movie, but honestly, I've tried to avoid it. Why? Because I have mixed feelings about it, yet I know that a lot of people love it, and that intimidates me. I don't enjoy putting myself out there knowing that what I say will probably go against the tide of popular opinion. And where this movie is concerned, some people are so intense, whether their opinion is positive or negative. I have preferred to avoid all that, but I can't hold out forever, so here we are. And I'm going to be as fair as I can while still expressing my personal opinions. There are good things about the movie, things that I like. There are also things that have bothered me ever since I first saw it 14 years ago, and I'm going to talk about it all, and I'm going to try to do so in equal proportion. One thing I've decided not to do, however, is to harp on how this version compares to other versions. This is not an adaptation comparison video. There are plenty of other videos, other blogs that talk about that, and that is just not something I want to get into, because that's where a lot of the nastiness comes in, so I don't want to open that Pandora's box. I'm just going to talk about this movie as it is, judge it on its own merit. So here we go. This Pride and Prejudice is a very aesthetic film. There are several finely crafted shots and artistic touches, things that are actually quite technical and complicated from a production standpoint, but they're so unobtrusive that you may watch the movie and not even realize what was achieved. The photography of the scenery is gorgeous. There's a creative use of time lapses and editing to enhance a mood or advance the story, and there are several memorable long tracking shots, particularly the one in the beginning that introduces each member of the Bennet family, and the one at the Netherfield ball that zooms around the rooms, condensing all the mortifying events of the night into one fluid sequence. And these impressive visuals are augmented with Dario Marianelli's beautiful score, which is one of my favorite period drama soundtracks. So it's pleasant to look at and to listen to. I do think, however, as an adaptation, it aims more for aesthetics than for book accuracy. The main beats of the plot are there, but every time I watch the movie, and I've seen it at least 4 times now, I feel dissatisfied with the storytelling. The story moves so quickly. If you're watching this movie as your first introduction to Pride and Prejudice, good luck keeping up with the story and understanding the significance of all the major plot points the first time around. The plot gallops, and so do many of the lines, especially Keira Knightley's. It might be most noticeable with her because she has the most dialogue, but it really did feel like she was speeding through it. I don't know if this was a creative choice or a necessity dictated by the studio's desire to cram everything into a 120-minute runtime. That's the problem you run into with just about every Hollywood-produced theatrical release adaptation. It's basically impossible to reproduce an entire novel in under 2 hours. Things have to be cut or condensed for time. That said, I don't feel like they were actually trying to stay that faithful to Austen's dialogue. There are a lot of lines noticeably absent or altered, and that is something that bugs me. Austen's dialogue is very familiar to a lot of people, so why change it? Why water it down? Is it old and stale now? I don't think so. The book's still massively popular. There were also scenes not included that I feel could have improved character development. Scenes like Lizzie challenging Wickham's story when he returns with Lydia. Wickham, played by Rupert Friend, gets surprisingly little screen time as it is, and the only thing that passes between them in their final interaction is a curt nod. It's not nearly the same. Or Mr. Collins calling or writing to censure the Bennet family in the midst of their disgrace. This scene shows the more vicious side of his character. Without it, Collins is awkward and bumbly, but relatively harmless. Or Lizzie and Darcy having a real conversation after they've professed their love for each other, but I'll come back to that. Actually, I can't figure out where else to put these comments in this review, so I'll just drop them in here. I find, people are gonna hate me for saying this, but I find the ending of the movie particularly dissatisfying. The second proposal dialogue, if that's what you want to call it, leaves so much to be desired. And I know, millions of girls have swooned over the line, "You have bewitched me, body and soul, and I love you." Yeah, that he's so shy and tentative is endearing, but and then Elizabeth's response is so lackluster. Well then, your hands are cold. These two have so much more to say to each other, come on! Ignoring the fact that these lines aren't in the book, this scene doesn't play out this way at all, and that we need to see them talk to each other more, besides all that, this just doesn't do anything for me. At this point, when I am watching a romantic period drama, whether it's 2 hours or 4 hours or 8 hours, Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, Charles Dickens, whoever, I have been waiting for this moment and I want my heart to be racing, or at least beating slightly faster, and I feel nothing. And the final scene doesn't do anything for me either. The alternative American ending scene with Darcy and Elizabeth in their jammies at Pemberley, where she bats at his leg and he says, "Mrs. Darcy, Mrs. Darcy, Mrs. Darcy." That scene actually pushed me from neutral territory into negative territory the first time I watched it, which I don't think is what they were going for at all. Anyway, I'm getting worked up and I'm turning red, and that's not good because we still have a long way to go. I absolutely do not expect a 2-hour Hollywood movie to adapt every little thing from a book. But I don't think I'm asking for little things. And besides, this movie is already just over 2 hours, so I feel like they might as well have gone for 2.5 hours and given us an extra 20 pages or so of script. If they just took the time to flesh out some major plot points, they could have diminished the whiplash effect. If they'd struck more of a balance between the long, artsy scenes where nothing's actually happening, and the dialogue-heavy scenes that convey crucial, relevant information, the movie might have been a more satisfying adaptation. Now, I want to say a few things about characterizations. The Bennet household is absolutely chaotic. This is often played for comedic effect, and it's fine and to a certain degree realistic. You grow up in a big family, small house, lots of girls, this is familiar. But their home is also very, very rustic. Too rustic. Why is there a pig in the house? Why is Longbourn so run down and dirty? They do have servants. Are they not doing their jobs? I think the filmmakers were aiming to emphasize the class difference. Darcy's home, Pemberley, looks like a museum, complete with marble statue gallery, where, by the way, we spend an unbelievably long time. By contrast, the Bennets look poor. Now, they're not supposed to be rich, but they're not totally destitute either. Remember the line, "He is a gentleman, I am a gentleman's daughter, so far we are equal." That line's not actually in this version. I'm just saying they went overboard. The Bennets weren't living in squalor, and I don't believe the girls would have such lousy table manners either. Book Mrs. Bennet had a one-track mind, and maybe she neglected some of the finer points of her daughter's education, but even she would be appalled at this behavior. Again, I think they were going for refreshingly modern and realistic, but it's just too much. I also find it difficult to tell which sister is Lydia and which sister is Kitty for at least half the movie, and because one is played by Carey Mulligan, who went on to become much more famous after this, I'm inclined to think that she's playing the more important role, but nope, she's Kitty. Not that it matters much, they're pretty interchangeable here. Many of Jane Austen's characters, not just in Pride and Prejudice, are silly and absurd. That's intentional. But a lot of these characters seem even more foolish than usual, especially the members of the Bennet family, including, at points, Jane and Lizzie. It bothers me that Jane, played by Rosamund Pike, also way more famous now than when this movie came out, is portrayed as being barely more intelligent than her younger sisters. She's not supposed to be clever, that's Lizzie's department, but I do hold her to a higher standard. And I don't think she'd be with the others always listening behind doors. As for Keira Knightley as Elizabeth, I don't know. She's okay. I often feel like she's speaking lines, not embodying the character, and I find her a little too impertinent sometimes. There's a fine line between witty and rude, and I think there are occasions when she crosses that line. What really upsets me, though, is what they did to Bingley. They made him so ridiculous here. The bouffant hair, the vapid expressions, the idiotic laugh. Bingley's supposed to be an intellectual lightweight, a nice, friendly guy, not brilliant, but he's not supposed to be a complete and utter fool. I also feel I should mention the issue of historical accuracy, or the lack thereof, though it's something I hesitate to dwell on because I'm not an expert on the subject. I've watched a lot of movies, I've read books. I'm not an authority, but I do feel like I have a sense of when something's right and when something isn't, and there are a lot of things here that just don't feel quite right. Like Caroline Bingley wearing what appears to be her undergarments as evening gowns. Pretty sure this would be considered scandalous. All the times the girls go out and about with their hair down, but especially Elizabeth Bennet showing up at Netherfield looking like this. I know, she walked all the way, it was muddy, etc., but this seems like overkill. Bingley coming into Jane's bedroom while she lies there convalescing. Shocking! Lady Catherine calling on the Bennets in the middle of the night. Bingley reaching for Jane's ribbon or dress or whatever he's doing on the sly here. Most improper! Darcy just walking into Mr. Collins' house in the middle of the night to deliver his letter, and Lizzie's standing there undressed. These are all things that stick out to me whenever I watch the movie. If it was just one or two things, I could overlook it, no problem, but it accumulates. Okay, at this point I have a bunch of other things to say, but I don't know how to organize it, so I'm just gonna go through a list. Things I do like, and things I haven't decided on. Things I like, and this is not exclusive. I've already talked positively about the cinematography, the scenery, the music. These are just random positive things I want to mention. The part during the dance at the Netherfield ball when Darcy and Elizabeth are going down the line and they get so engrossed in their heated argument and suddenly the music crescendos and everyone else disappears, like in that moment it's just the two of them in the whole room. The close-up as Darcy hands her into the carriage and then walks away, kind of flexing his hand muscles, like he's thinking, I just touched her hand! Act cool, act cool. The way Mr. Collins is written may not feel complete to me, but I do enjoy Tom Hollander's performance, especially his delivery of the line, "What excellent boiled potatoes," which always makes me laugh. The amusing scene that shows the utter impracticality of trying to maintain a private conversation while dancing, as both Jane and Mr. Collins try to talk to Lizzie during a dance, and Donald Sutherland's performance at the end. This version leaves a lot to be desired for me where Mr. Bennet is concerned, but I do find the scene where he gives his consent moving. And here are some things I'm still undecided on after all these years. The proposal. It's the wrong place, the wrong time, but it's interesting. I think it's a well-acted scene, especially on McFadden's part, and the cadence of the dialogue is good. I'm just not sure about the fact that in the middle of this big argument where she's just been insulted and he's been harshly rejected, suddenly they're both leaning into the maybe we kiss now position. I know, sexual tension. It just doesn't feel natural to me. The montage of Bingley and Darcy rehearsing Bingley's proposal. This doesn't feel like something Austen would ever have written, so on the one hand I object, but on the other hand, it makes for a funny, fanfiction-y bonus scene, so I'm kind of okay with it. The characterization of Darcy. He doesn't really come across as proud, so not really that Darcy-ish. I used to not like McFadden's Darcy at all. Part of it was his hairstyle, but part of it was that he was just kind of blah. But at some point I read about how they took a different approach with his character, and rewatching it with that in mind, I appreciated the performance more. Darcy's just a super shy guy who's expected to be social, but isn't all that good at it, never feels comfortable, never gets enough practice to become a natural, if that's possible. Extroverts will insist that it is. Oh, if you just throw yourself out there and get used to it, you won't be introverted anymore. Okay. So this Darcy is very relatable to those of us in the audience who are socially awkward and reserved. We go to parties, reluctantly, getting disproportionately anxious in the process, try to get away with not saying too much, especially to any strangers we may encounter. When we do have to talk, there's at least a 50% chance that we'll say something stupid or nonsensical, and then we'll spend the rest of the time being embarrassed and trying to disappear. And because we're being elusive or hanging out on the fringe or only talking to the people we came with, anyone who doesn't know us will think that we're snobby or full of ourselves or only interested in talking to our people. Maybe I'm reading into things, but I think that's basically Darcy here, especially in the Meryton Assembly scene where we first meet him, which in this movie looks to me like an absolute nightmare. It's crowded, it's noisy, it's probably hot and smelly too, and when the Netherfield group walks in, the music and dancing stops and all eyes are on them. It's awful. I think maybe I'm actually supposed to think this scene is fun. Wow, Jane Austen times were great, so wild. But I'd be commiserating in a corner with Darcy, saying, how soon can we leave? So, all that to say, it's a different interpretation of Darcy, but one that kind of makes him more relatable. At least if you delve into his mind that much. Okay, I think I covered everything. Please remember that these are just my opinions. Opinions that have been marinating for 14 years. Some things are first impressions that have remained through repeated viewings. Others are issues that have made themselves apparent more gradually. If you love this movie, that's fine. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. I hope that's come through. I've talked to a lot of people who consider it a favorite, and they are very enthusiastic about it, and that's great. Enthusiasm is great, as long as you can still be nice to those who have a different opinion. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it wasn't too all over the place. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching!